Your people migrate with the seasons, follow the bison and gather food from the land. When winter comes, you will find a place where the wind is not so cruel and there is more firewood. This year, your band chose a river valley where there are many cottonwood trees and some places on the mountain to shield from the north wind. The sun was already very low, although it was not yet around 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Here in winter, the days are very short, and the remaining light is thin and cold, as if the sun itself has lost interest in warming the earth. Firewood since the morning. Your shoulders hurt because of the weight of the things tied to your back, mainly dead branches, as the green wood emits too much smoke and generates very little heat. Your hands are wrapped in dander, but the cold has already seeped in, and your fingers feel stiff and clumsy. When your hands are like this, you have learned to move carefully, because a clumsy hand can drop things, and your firewood falling down means bending down to pick it up. Every unnecessary movement will steal warmth from your body. The snow beneath my feet was not deep yet, but it was already enough to make one walk slowly. With every step you take, you can break through a thin layer of ice shell. The cold seeps in through the soles of your deer leather shoes, which are lined with high-end fur, but still can't stop the continuous cold. You will think of the dome tent waiting for you, a shelter for your family, a conical tent made of water cowhide. It's not very big and not particularly warm, but it's still better than nothing. Tonight, just like every night, you will be grateful for this. As you approach the camp, you see smoke rising from several tents. These gray columns slowly climb up into the sky before the wind scatters them. Smoke is a good sign. This means that the flame is burning, and the flame means warmth, though in an instant. Your tent is located near the center of the camp. According to tradition, its entrance faces east. The animal skins covering them were very old, with patches in some places. You could see the wind blowing beneath the edges, gently lifting them up and allowing the cold to sneak in quietly. Inside, the space was dim, with the only light coming from the central fire pit and the pale glow seeping in through the smoke holes at the top. The air is filled with thick smoke, not enough to suffocate you, but enough to sting your eyes and cover the inside of your throat. Your mother is looking after the fire, carefully adding small twigs one by one, because firewood is very precious and must be supplied in limited quantities. When you came in, she raised her head and glanced at you. Although she said nothing, you could see the relief in her eyes. You're back with more firewood. The fire won't go out tonight, which relieves me. You threw the bundle down by the stove and sat down, draped the robe over your shoulders. It was a thick bison skin, and the brain matter was tin dark and soft. The warmth of the fire caresses your face, but your back is still cold. You know this is night. The constant interaction between the heat of the fire and the cold air surging in from all directions. Your brothers and sisters were crowded on the other side of the tent, wrapped in their long robes, and their faces were almost invisible. One of them is coughing, which is a dry and shrill sound. You will feel a little worried because getting sick in winter is dangerous. The body is weak due to illness and cannot resist the cold. The ground beneath your feet is covered with willow mats and withered grass, and beneath it is bare land. It's neither soft nor warm, but it's exactly what you have. You have learned to bend your body, minimize contact with the ground and stay in the air as much as possible so that the heat of the fire can reach you. Your father is mending a pair of deer leather shoes by the fire. His hand moved slowly, piercing through the hard animal skin with a bone needle. His fingers were thick and scarred. He worked in silence, expressionless, his attention completely focused on the task. If you look at him for a while, you will wonder how many times winter is like this. Small, repetitive tasks are accomplished in silence, over and over again, because there is no other choice. The stag leather shoes are worn out and must be mended, because going barefoot in winter means death. Your grandmother was sitting by the stove, her face full of wrinkles and her eyes half-minus closed. Wrapped in layers of animal skin, she was still trembling. Her body was too old to generate heat as before. You have seen the elderly die in winter, their bodies completely abandoned, unable to bear another cold night. This is neither dramatic nor sudden. They just grew weaker day by day, until one morning they no longer woke up. The fire crackled gently. You moved closer, allowing the heat to seep into your skin. But you can't sit too close, because the smokier the fire is more severe. Inhaling too much will give you a headache. This is the paradox of a winter night. You must choose between warm air and breathable air, between the sting of smoke and the bone-chilling frost. There is no perfect solution, only continuous adjustment, a balancing act that lasts until dawn. Outside, the wind is blowing. You can hear the wind sliding over the tent. It's a low and sad sound. The animal's skin rustled slightly, stirring the flames and making them dance. Your mother reached for the cover hanging near the entrance and adjusted it, trying to block the wind. This is helpful, but not very effective. Cold is patient. It will eventually find a way in. You would think of the meat hanging outside, freezing solid in the air at night. There isn't much left. Winter is long and hunting activities are few. Your stomach hasn't been full yet. It hasn't been full for several weeks. Hunger is a frequent visitor in winter, a lingering, dull pain. But hunger can also make you sleepy. Sleepiness is a kind of kindness because sleep means you don't feel so cold. You have learned to accept the heaviness brought by an empty stomach. It drags you into the unconscious, and the cold cannot follow. Her mother scooped out a pot of light from the stove, mainly water, along with a few slices of dried meat and some wild roots. It's very hot, and that's the most important thing. Its heat spreads throughout your chest, warming you from within. You ate slowly, savoring each bite carefully, knowing that this was all the food until the next morning. The warmth of the stew is short-lived, but as long as it lasts, it feels like a little miracle. After the meal, your mother put the fire aside and covered the coal with ashes to slow down its burning. The flame gradually died out, and the color grew darker and colder. This is the most dangerous part of the night. When the fire goes out, when the cold strikes again. Someone must stay awake to take care of the fire and add firewood when the coal begins to fade. It's your father's turn tonight. He sat by the stove, pulling his robe tightly. You could see the weariness on his face, the exhaustion of a person who has done this for too many nights. He knows that there are still more nights to come. You lie down to pull your bathrobe over your head, curl up into a ball, and try to catch any heat your body can generate. Beside you, your brothers and sisters have already fallen asleep. Their breathing gentle and steady. The ground beneath your feet is hard and cold. No matter how you stand, you can't escape the coldness seeping out from below. Your buttocks hurt. Your shoulders hurt. You keep moving, trying to find a place where it doesn't hurt. Above your head, smoke rises from the smoke hole. Beyond the smoke hole, you can see several distant and cold stars. For a while and then closed your eyes. Sleep is hard -1. Your body is too cold and your mind is too uncomfortable. But in the end, exhaustion overwhelmed everything and you fell into a light and restless sleep. You'll never completely lose consciousness. There, every sound, the crackling of fire, the rustling of animal skins, and the coughing of brothers and sisters will bring you back to a state of wakefulness. You dream, but your dreams are cold and fragmented. The scene of snow, the scene of wind, walks endlessly in the white emptiness. And each time it was colder than before. Your father is still awake feeding the fire. You half-minus close your eyes and look at him, grateful that he is still there and that the fire is still burning. At dawn you woke up again. This time you noticed that frost had formed inside the dome tent, and small crystals were attached to the animal skins. Your breath solidifies in the air, condenses on the wall, and now it flickers faintly in the dim light. Your eyebrows are stiff from the frost, and when you reach out to touch them your fingers get wet. You fell asleep in your own cold breath, and this consciousness is strangely yet strangely familiar. This is what a winter morning looks like. The outside world is still pitch-dark, but there is a faint flash of lightning in the east, which indicates that the sun will return, although it won't bring much warmth. You lay still for a while, reluctant to leave the small bag of warmth you had created under your robe. But remaining still means keeping cold. Finally, you force yourself to sit up. Your body is resisting. Every joint is stiffened, every muscle is tense. Your mother has woken up. She coaxed the fire back to life and added saltweeds to it until the flames were burning. Warmth is immediate and precious. You move closer and place your hand on the flame until your fingers regain sensation. This is how a winter morning begins. Slowly, painfully, with a chill, reluctantly let go of its tight grip. You will spend the whole day moving around, working and trying to stay warm. Tonight, this cycle will start again. You don't complain because it's meaningless. Everyone is very cold. Everyone is tired. Everyone is hungry. This is the meaning of living in winter. You have learned to endure day after day and night after night until the season finally comes to an end and the world becomes gentle again. But spring is still far away, and there are many such nights ahead. Gazing at the flames, watching them dance and flicker. Now this warm little circle is all you have, and it must be enough. In the winter of 1863, there was a man called Black Elk in the Oglala Lakota tribe. His earliest memory is the cold. It's not the bone-minus chilling wind that suddenly blows in winter, but the kind of coldness that penetrates to the marrow and lingers there. That indifference will become part of your understanding of the world. Like all the children of his people, he was born in a domed tent. The first breath of air he took was filled with the strong smell of smoke and the burnt smell of buffalo and much. His mother wrapped him in soft leather. In the first few months of his life, he only knew that warmth was something stolen from his mother, a borrowed heat that vanished the moment she put him down. In the winter sky, conical poles rise like black fingers, their tips converging at a single point, and smoke escapes like thin grey lines. The interior space appears smaller than the exterior. The walls slope inward, forming a conical refuge that blocks the roaring elements from outside. Winter was the backdrop of his childhood, not because it was unusual, but because it was so frequent and so decisive. His early life rhythm was measured by the changes of seasons. Winter is always the longest and toughest. It tests whether you are strong enough to face the next spring. His tent is not big and it gets very crowded in winter. He slept among his siblings, whose bodies were pressed together by the thick robes. He knew very early on that warmth is something shared, something you share or lose. The robes were made of water buffalo leather, tend to become soft and supple, and still carried the faint smell of the animals they had once covered. When he pressed his face against them in the darkness, he could imagine the bison themselves, their huge bodies moving across the summer grassland. This thought gave him comfort. His mother would light a fire at night and cover the coal with ashes so that they would burn slowly until dawn. In the darkness, he could hear the breathing of his family members, each with a different rhythm. Together, they formed a chorus that was more reassuring than any lullaby. The fire pit is located in the center of the conical tent, and the stones are carefully arranged in a circle to control the flames. Throughout the night, someone would wake up to feed it, adding small pieces of wood or dry feces. The fire would briefly burn, casting dancing shadows on the animal skin wall. His grandmother would tell stories. Her voice was deep and rhythmic. It would cleanse his eyes and listen, imagining the world she described, the world of creation and trickery, the world of talking animals and souls walking among the crowd. These stories liberated him from the cold and made time pass more quickly. He began to associate her voice with a warmth that had nothing to do with fire. She told him the story of the spider Rectima. This spider was very smart but often very stupid. Its plans would backfire and make the children laugh. She told him a story about a woman with a white water buffalo and brought the sacred pipe to those who taught them the ritual of connecting heaven and earth. She told him about the thunderbirds, those great spirits whose wings made the sound of a storm and whose eyes flashed lightning on the summer plains. She said that in winter, thunderbirds sleep in the west, which is why winter is silent and why the sky looks heavier and more oppressive. His father was a respected man with excellent hunting skills. In good times he could bring back enough meat for the whole family to get through the winter. However, even in bumper years there have never been bumper years. Only in bumper years, The black elk learned to eat slowly to ensure that he could finish every bite, because he didn't know when the next meal would come. In autumn, when hunting's good and the air is dry enough to preserve the meat, then meat is sun-dried into thin strips. These wooden strips hung on the poles of the conical tent like black ribbons. Throughout the winter, people would cook them together with roots and berries into stews to help the family survive the barren months. His mother is very good at making food last longer, extending each meal so that everyone can have something to eat. She would add water to the stew until it became thinner and more like soup, but it was warm. The warmth in the stomach was better than nothing. In some winters bison don't come. Cattle move elsewhere, or there are too few of them. Those winters are different. They are quieter, heavier, and even children can sense a tense atmosphere. During that period, he looked at his parents' faces and saw the worries they were trying to hide. He understood like a child that winter could kill people. During these tough winters, the camp became increasingly quiet, and the usual laughter and conversations were replaced by a vigilant silence. To conserve their energy, people walked more slowly. Even the dogs seemed to sense the shortage. They lay beside the fire, with their ribs exposed under their fur. The elders would gather to discuss where the bison might have gone, whether they should take action to look for them, or stay and wait for smaller prey. These discussions can last for several hours, with everyone taking turns to speak. The black elk will listen from the edge of the circle, understanding the significance of these decisions. When he was 4 or 5 years old, a relative passed away. At that time he could already remember, but still couldn't understand. He had no idea what illness they had. All he knew was that one day they were coughing and extremely weak there, and the next day they were wrapped in long robes and carried to the snow. He remembered the song, accompanied by the low and mournful chanting of the corpse. He remembered his mother weeping silently, her face turning away. He doesn't understand death yet, but he understands loss, and he knows that winter makes the possibility of loss greater. The corpse was placed on a very high scaffold so that wolves and other animals couldn't reach it. The guillotine stood at the edge of the camp, clearly visible against the backdrop of the white scenery. In the days that followed, he would always glance at the guillotine, half hoping that the man would come back. His grandmother explained that the ghost had gone to another world and his body was now just an empty shell, empty and meaningless. But he couldn't stop thinking about the cold and how his body would freeze alone under the winter sky. The Lakota people often follow bison on their migrations, and the winter migrations are extremely cruel. He remembered struggling through the knee-minus deep snowfall, his leather shoes soaked through and his legs numb. The wind on the open plain is merciless, no one can escape it. You just keep your head down and walk hour after hour until someone tells you to stop. He remembered that when his mother was walking, he fell asleep in her arms. He was so tired that he could hardly keep his eyes open. When he woke up later, he found himself in a new place. The tent had been set up and the fire had been lit. The women carried the poles of the tent and animal skins, all of which were needed to build a home. The men rode ahead looking for danger and prey. Children and women take walks together or ride in carriages pulled by dogs or horses. Sometimes the snow was too deep, and the horses struggled. With each step they took, their legs would break through the hard shells. The Trai River would entwine snowdrifts, and everyone had to stop to dig them out. Their hands became numb in the work. He learned to recognize the signal that a stop was approaching, to observe the way the leading rider slowed down, and to watch them gesture towards the sheltered areas of the hills or woods. When they stopped, the camp would rise with skillful efficiency, and each family knew exactly what to do. Women would clear the snow from the area where the tents were located with leather flakes of their hands. The men would drive the wooden stakes into the frozen ground. Within less than an hour, the people in the tent would stand up, smoke would rise from the mountain top, and life would go on as if it had never stopped. He fell ill when he was 9. Sure, it was winter. Diseases always seem to come in winter when the body is weak and the resistance is low. He remembered lying beside the fire, his body running a high fever, and his thoughts coming and going in strange and vivid dreams. His mother sat beside him, bathing his forehead with snow. He could hear the sounds around him. His father, his grandmother, and other people whose names he couldn't recall were speaking in a low and worried tone. A high fever makes everything seem distant and unreal. The walls of the conical tent seemed to be breathing, expanding, contracting. The fire turned into a living thing, dancing purposefully. He would doze off in a daze and wake up in a short while, not knowing whether several hours had passed or just a few seconds. Time has lost its meaning and turned into a flowing and strange thing, like a leaf floating on the water surface. His mother prepared medicine and brewed tea with the tree roots and barks that people have used for generations. The Team Ines shirt was very bitter. When she held the cup to his mouth, he would vomit, but she was very patient and let him have a little each time. She also sang to him. It was the old songs her mother sang to her. Those songs were to summon the soul that was too far away from the body. Her voice was steady and powerful. He held onto it tightly, just like a rope tied to a person on the verge of drowning. It was during this illness that he saw visions for the first time, although he didn't understand what they were at that time. He saw himself standing on a huge flat surface, surrounded by horses of all colors, some white, some red and some yellow. They were dancing, their movements seeming both casual and purposeful. He saw some tall and blurry figures in the distance waving at him, but he couldn't reach them. He wanted to walk towards them, but the ground beneath his feet kept moving. No matter how far he went, they were always far away from him. The sky above was filled with clouds that moved too fast, speeding through it, as if they were fleeing from something. The horses continued to dance and he realized that they were not random at all. They are taking on various shapes and symbols. He can almost recognize them but can't name them. A figure in the distance raised an arm and pointed at something behind him. When he turned around, he saw a tree standing alone on the plain. The tree still bloomed with its branches covered in flowers that shone like stars. When he woke up, he felt very cold, colder than ever before. His mother held him in her arms and gently rocked him, but couldn't say a word. Finally, he fell asleep again. Sometimes diseases can be like this. When the illness is over, he becomes stronger. But the memory of that vision remained in his mind, both vivid and strange. At that time he knew what it meant, although he didn't know what it was. His grandmother told him that the vision was sacred and a message from the gods. She said he should remember everything he saw, every detail, because one day he would understand. He tried to draw what he saw, using a stick to dig out images from the soil. Horses, trees, and figures in the distance. He drew over and over again, trying to capture everything he saw when he had a fever. As he grew older, he learned the skills needed in winter, for rabbits and track deer in the snow. He learned to recognize the signs of an approaching storm, to recognize the way the air calmed down, and to recognize the way birds quieted down. He learned to make a fire in the wind and snow, to coax out flames from damp wood and keep them burning all night long. His father taught him to read snow in order to distinguish the footprints of different animals. The footprints of rabbits are very light and hardly affect the ground, while those of deer are deeper and clearer. He learned that the newly fallen snow could reveal the secrets of the places where animals passed by and where they stopped to eat or rest. Old Zoom told different stories. The railway tracks have softened and are covered with ice. This was a trip a few days ago. He learned to walk quietly in the winter scenery, treading carefully to avoid creaking on the covered snow. When hunting, quietness was indispensable. He kept practicing until the sound of his footsteps was so soft that even his father had to take a second look to know where he was. He also came to understand that warmth is not something you take for granted. It is what you have won, what you have strived for, and what you will lose if you are careless. One time when he was learning to draw a bow in winter, his fingers froze stiff. To better feel the strings, he took off his mittens. A few minutes later, his fingers became light and numb. His father seized his hands, stuffed them under his arms and held them there until waves of burning pain hit him. The lesson is very clear. In winter, carelessness is punished without exception. There is no second chance. One winter when he was 12 years old, hunting was very difficult. The bison moved southward, beyond the range of his group, and smaller prey such as deer and elk became scarce. He went out with his father and others, searching in the thick snow, but found nothing. They stayed outside for several days, wrapped in robes and sleeping in the open air. The cold was bone-minus chilling, and he felt he couldn't survive. They don't make fires at night, fearing that the smoke might spot their presence by any prey. They huddled together, sharing their body temperatures. He understood what true coldness meant, a coldness colder than any he had experienced in the relatively safe tent. In those days, men seldom spoke to save energy. But on the third night, an elderly hunter began to sing a prayer song softly, asking for the guidance of the gods. But he survived. When they finally returned to the camp empty-handed and exhausted, he felt a strange sense of pride. He endured. Patience is the most important thing. That winter, the elders carefully distributed the food to ensure that the children ate first, then the hunters, and finally the others. He watched his grandmother reject her share and insist that she wasn't hungry. He knew that she was sacrificing herself to let others survive. As winter passed, the people in the camp grew more and more haggard. The horse had lost weight and its ribs were exposed under its winter clothes. People walked slowly, as if they had no extra energy. The children no longer played the games they usually played in winter, and their laughter disappeared. They sat right next to the fire, wrapped in long robes that could save them, their eyes wide open and their expressions serious. His mother's face was taut, and the skin on her cheekbones was tight. She continued working, scraping leather and sewing deer skins, but her movements were slower and more careful. That spring she died, not because of hunger, but because she had endured too many winters and too many cold nights. He mourned for her, but he also knew that was how it was. The elders gave them what they had left, and the young people inherited their strength. The death of his grandmother left a deep impression on him, and it was not until later that he fully understood. She has always been the guardian of stories, and her voice makes winter bearable. Without her, the cold seemed deeper and more personal. They mourned her in the traditional way, cutting off her hair and cutting her arms. This kind of pain is sharp and direct, exactly the opposite of the dull ache of sadness. Her body, like those of others who had died before her, was placed on the execution platform. Stood there, looking up at it, trying to find something to say goodbye. But words seemed not enough. In the end, he just stood there in silence, allowing the cold wind to carry his thoughts to where she had gone. When he grew up, he was still a boy. But as he began to enter adulthood, he started to accompany people on hunting trips. Winter hunting is different from summer hunting. More difficult, more dangerous, but also more necessary. He particularly remembers a hunting trip when he found a water buffalo in Ear and Frozen River. Those people walked carefully and silently. He followed behind, and his breathing was clearly visible in the cold air. They found the buffalo lying in a shallow depression to shelter from the wind. The hunt was fast and successful. After that, they killed it where it was lying, with blood and fat all over their hands. He remembered the warmth of the water buffalo's body, steam rising from the exposed organs, and he remembered pressing his cold hand onto the warm animal skin, feeling the heat seeping into his frozen fingers. This was a small matter, but it always accompanied him, just like a living body that could offer warmth even in death. The water buffalo's blood, steaming hot, was poured onto the snow, melting the small pond on the white surface. The workers worked very fast because they knew that if they delayed, the cold would freeze the meat and make it more difficult to cut. They preserved everything, including animal skins, organs, and bones that could be boiled into bone marrow. Nothing is wasted, for wasting in winter means death. They took the meat back to the camp and everyone was full that night. It was very warm in the tent and the fire was high. Winter does not refresh you, it does not energizing. For a while, winter didn't seem so cruel. But winter is long, and a good hunt cannot change this. The cold always returns, and the work of keeping warm continues. The black elk grew into a young man, and along with it came new responsibilities. He was chosen to train with the witch doctor, learning songs and rituals to help people endure pain. He realized that warmth is not only physical, but also spiritual. The songs sung in winter are powerful. Praying to the gods can relieve pain. The ceremony held in the cold depths is a way to preserve life against the darkness. He learned to enter the sweating room, a small building heated with stones, where the heat was almost unbearable. The sweat room was built very low from the ground and covered with leather to dissipate heat. The room was pitch-dark. The only light came from the glowing stones sent from the fire outside. The pharmacist would pour water onto the stones, and the steam would fill the hut so thick that he could hardly see his hand covering his face. The high temperature would press down on him, forcing the air to be expelled from his lungs. He had to breathe slowly and carefully, taking a small mouthful of the scalding hot air. Sweating rooms are even used in winter, perhaps especially in winter, as it is a way to clear the cold from the body and remind oneself that the heat still exists and you are still alive. He would sit in the sweating room with others basking in thick steam that was suffocating. He would feel as if his body had opened up and his claws were releasing something he couldn't name. People sang in the dark and prayed to the gods. The pharmacist would talk about the visions he saw and the messages his ancestors had given him. The black elk would listen, feeling sweat streaming down his face and back. After that, when he walked into the cold air, his body would steam off. He would feel clean, refreshed and ready to face another night. This is a paradox, using heat to counter cold, but it works. One winter he had grown up and become a man. He took part in a visual exploration. This is not the season to do such things. Traditionally, visual exploration was carried out in summer, but he felt cold upon and went. He climbed up to a high place, a mountain blown by the wind, wrapped in only a thin coat, and sat there praying. The cold was cruel, passing through his clothes, his skin, his flesh, until he felt it in his heart. Before embarking on the adventure, he fasted for 2 days and ate nothing. Hunger made him feel colder and more aggressive. His stomach cramps and his head feels light. But these discomforts are part of the process, a way to strip away the ordinary world. He stayed there for 3 days and 3 nights, fasting and praying. The cold turned into something else. Not an enemy, but an existence, a teacher. He saw the illusion again, this time even more clearly. He understood that the cold was stripping away everything unnecessary, leaving only what was necessary. The next night, the stars seemed to be getting brighter and closer until he felt he could reach out and touch them. The wind blew in a whisper that he could almost understand. He knew that the ghost was nearby. On the 3rd day, he saw 6 grandfathers and 6 directions of power. They told him about his fate and the work he would do for his people. They showed him what was about to happen, both terrifying and wonderful, and he tried to remember every detail. When he came down from the mountain, he changed. He didn't say what he had seen or heard, but those who knew him could tell the difference. His eyes maintained an unprecedented distance, as if he were looking at this world and another at the same time. He acted in a new and well-considered way, with each action being a purposeful weight. The doctors recognized what had happened. They pulled him aside and listened to him recount his vision in its entirety. He spoke for several hours, describing everything he had seen. They nodded, understanding the meaning the ghost had shown him. Winter left its mark on him and shaped him, and the rest of his life was marked by this shaping. He endured many winters, witnessing the world of his people change in ways he could never have imagined, seeing bison disappear into the old way of life shaken. The white skein built their fortresses and roads, and brought diseases more fatal than any winter. Thousands upon thousands of bison were slaughtered and left to rot on the plains, and the way of life of the Lakota people began to collapse. He fought on the greasy grass, which the whites called the baffle of Little Bighorn, and he saw Custer fall. But that victory was short-lived and empty, for the wave of change could not be stopped by a single baffle. These tribes were forced into reservations, hunting was prohibited and their ceremonies were forbidden. Children are sent to boarding schools, where they are punished for speaking their own language and are taught that the culture is wrong. He watched his people struggling to survive in this new world, where winter was no longer the greatest enemy. The cold still comes every year, but now it has descended upon those who had already broken down and failed. But after all this, he still remembers the lessons of the early winter, the value of patience, the necessity of community, and the knowledge that warmth is as fragile and precious as life itself. When he grew old, his body began to weaken. He often recalled those winter nights spent in the tent, with the fire burning low and his family closely surrounding him. He recalled the stories his grandmother had told, his father's silent vigilance, and the scene of his mother adjusting the animal's skin by hand to block the wind. He thought of the cold and was no longer afraid. Having seen so much and experienced so much, death was not terrifying to him. This is merely another journey, another migration to a new place. He will, as before, do this patiently, joyfully, and with the knowledge he has endured. He recalled the scene he had seen in his childhood, where horses rode dancing on plains. Now he understood what that meant. The horse is man himself, traveling through time and striving to maintain his own pattern in a world that wants to disperse them. He thought of the tree that blossomed in the cold. He understood that it represented hope, represented the tenacity of not giving up even if it seemed to have lost everything. He tried to be the tree of his people, keeping something alive when so many died. In the last few years of his life, he made his last trip to hold a ceremony to impart what he knew to those willing to listen. The government tried to stop him, but he still went because some things are more important than laws made by strangers. He stood in the center of the circle, feeling the winter wind blowing on his face. He sang an ancient song. His voice was weaker than before, but what he said remained the same as before, and his prayers changed over time. Young people came to listen to his speech, eager to connect with their past, and he told them everything he could remember. He told them about the buffalo era, about hunting and migration, about the rituals that sustained people's lives. He told them about winter, about the coldness of trials and teachings, about the flame that must be kept on in the darkest nights. He told them that patience is possible, survival is a form of resistance, and memory is a way to keep what others want to destroy alive. He lived with it all his life. When his time came, he knew he would see it again, and it would be a return home. The cold will take him away, just as it has taken many others, but he won't go without any preparation. He learned its lesson, lived in peace with its harshness, and found a clarity deep within it that warmth could never offer. Winter was his first teacher and will also be his last. Among them there is a kind of symmetry, a kind of completeness. He closed his eyes and saw again the vast plain, the dancing horses and the figures waiting in the distance. This time he knew he would reach them, cross that unpredictable land and stand before them. This time the journey won't end with waking up. This time, winter will take him all the way home, back to the place where his grandmother has been waiting, where the fire will never go out and the story will always continue. The cold shaped him, tested him and taught him. It will become the gateway to his future. He was ready from the very first winter of his life, when he took his first breath in a smoggy tent and learned that survival is struggle and struggle is sacred. He knew he would die in winter. Those who found him said his face was very calm. That day the snow fell very lightly, covering the earth in a white silence. Somewhere in the distance a dog barked, and then it was quiet. They wrapped him in a long robe and placed him on the execution platform, just as they had treated his grandmother and many others. The wind blew through the wooden stakes, turning them into streams. The sky was grey and lower, and it was snowing heavily. In the camp below, in a conical tent warmed by fire, a child was born. In the same season that marked the beginning of the Black Elk's life, he took his first breath. This cycle continues as always, and will continue as always. Winter has once again descended upon the earth, patient, eternal and ruthless. The elders would tell stories about the Black Elk, about his vision and wisdom, and the children would listen with their eyes wide open in the firelight. They will understand as he does that winter is a teacher, coldness is the truth, and survival requires more than just strength. This requires memory, community and courage to keep the fire going through the long night. So his story became part of a great story. A nation learns to live on harsh land, discovers beauty in harshness, finds warmth in unity, and finds meaning in patience. Cold will come again and again, but people will greet it as always, carrying the lessons passed down from generation to generation. the knowledge that spring always follows winter, and the knowledge that life continues. As long as someone remembers, nothing is truly lost. The black elk is that memory, that bridge connecting the past and the future. Although his body returned to earth, his teachings still exist and are passed down by those who have heard his words. They understand that his words are not just about winter, but about everything, about how to live, how to find meaning in the face of difficulties, and how to keep the most important things when everything else is taken away. The snow continued to fall, gently and silently, covering his guillotine, the camp and the vast plain as far as the eye could see. Under that white blanket, life is waiting. Though in a dormant state, it is not dead. They are ready to return when the seasons change, the cold fades away, and the earth remembers how to blossom. But that's for the future, because now there is only winter, only cold, only the wind moving on the frozen land, carrying the whispers of all those who have come before, all those who have learned the same lessons, all those who understand that winter is not an end, but a passage, a teacher, whose lessons once learned will never be forgotten. There is a question lingering between what we know and what we can only imagine. How do people truly keep warm on the coldest nights, when the temperature is far below freezing and the wind is bone-minus chilling? We have artifacts, we have buildings, we have oral history, but warmth itself leaves no trace. You can't dig out heat from underground. You can't use carbon to measure how the heat of fire feels on your skin, nor can you record the comfort of a neatly arranged animal skin bed. Archaeologists, shovels uncovered pottery shards, stone tools, and charred remains of ancient fireplaces. But the feeling of heat, the way it spreads between cold fingers, the way it relaxes tense muscles, it creates a safe zone in a hostile world. This is something that no museum can preserve. The past is presented before us in the form of fragments, and some of the most important fragments are not composed of solids at all. On the contrary, what we have are fragments of a puzzle, which suggest an answer but never fully complete it. We have cowhide, that elegant cowhide cone stretching on the wooden pole, and we know it is elaborately designed. Its structure itself embodies the wisdom accumulated by generations, as well as the continuous trials and errors over several centuries, ultimately reaching a nearly perfect state. There's multiple uses. There is no waste. Every choice is made after careful consideration. The understanding of aerodynamics of the Lakota people and others on the plains was something they could never express in scientific terms, but was proven through practice. The exhaust holes on the top of the tent are adjustable and controlled by two wooden poles, which enables residents to adjust the ventilation. These rods, known as smoke hoods or ears, can move according to the wind direction, creating a venturi effect that sucks smoke upwards while preventing the sinking air current from filling the room with suffocating smoke. Firefighters need to understand the wind direction, the sky, predict weather changes, and instinctively know when to adjust the flaps before the smoke becomes unbearable. Too much air in the fire burning too hot consume the wood quickly, while too little in the accumulation of smoke make the space unbreathable. This is an ongoing calibration, a continuous dialogue between fire and wind. This is not a structure that you can simply establish and forget. It requires attention, adjustment, and an unceasing dialogue with nature. In a tent, there is usually a lining, sometimes called the open fabric, which is hung a few feet above the ground. This creates a dead air space between the exterior and interior walls, which is an insulating layer that can retain heat and prevent air from reaching the people inside. The lining is usually decorated with family symbols and sacred designs, so even this functional element has become an expression of identity and faith. It hangs from the pillar of the small house and extends all the way to the ground, forming a sealed warm air surrounding the living space. The cold air entering from the bottom of the tent will sink and be drawn to the fire, creating convection that sucks in fresh air while pushing the smoke up and out. This method is very creative and effective, although it has never been perfect. On the coldest nights, with fierce winds howling and temperatures plummeting to -40 degrees Celsius, even the best designed conical tents cannot fully withstand the cold. Frost forms on the inner walls, creating complex ice crystal patterns that capture the flames. We know that people sleep on high beds made of willow branches, or on wooden platforms covered with layers of animal skins and furs. Sleeping directly on the ground means that heat is lost to the earth, which freezes into a solid state in winter, playing a huge role in absorbing heat. The platform bed, whether tied together with soft willow twigs or made with a more solid wooden frame, forms a kind of isolation between the sleeper and the endless cold below. Even a few inches of gap can make a huge difference in terms of comfort and survival rate. By raising the sleeping surface by a few inches, they created an air gap, providing some insulation. The bedding itself is layered. Buffalo robe, deerskin, bearskin. Each layer can absorb air, making it a better insulator than any solid material. The buffalo robe is especially precious. Its long fur is thick and curly, forming countless small air sacs. A well-prepared robe, if the fur is left all over the body and properly tanned, can weigh up to 20 pounds and provide warmth equivalent to several modern blankets. But the mystery deepens right here. Even after all these measures were taken, the cold still persisted. The fire at the center of the conical tent provides warmth, but it is a carefully managed small fire, and its heat radiates outward in a sphere. It warms those who draw near to it, while those who stay away from it feel cold. The physical principle of radiant heat means that a person sitting 3 feet away from the fire may feel comfortable, while one sitting 6 feet away will shiver. If too much wood is not consumed, dangerous conditions are not created, and the space is not filled with smoke beyond the ventilation capacity. The fire cannot grow larger. So, how do people get through the long and freezing nights? Part of the answer lies in human physiology and behavior. The body itself is a calorie-minus burning furnace to maintain its core temperature at 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit. But this furnace needs fuel. In winter, when physical activity is restricted and food supplies must be carefully rationed, there is always a problem with the body's ability to generate heat. People sleep together, sharing body temperature. The spacious conical tent in summer becomes crowded in winter. Family members squeeze side by side together, and their warmth combined is warmer than that of all parts combined. This is not merely practical. This is a physical expression of social, family and unity in resisting the cold. Grandparents, parents, children, and sometimes extended families or close friends all place themselves in the warmest positions. Young people and the elderly, whose heat is lost more quickly, are placed in the center. They went to bed dressed with layers of animal skins and furs serving both as clothes and blankets. They wrapped themselves in thick robes and learned to sleep in such a posture tightly curled up, with limbs drawn in, minimizing the surface area as much as possible. The fetal sleeping position is very natural for cold sleepers. It is a way to protect vital organs and reduce exposure. Draw your arms together, tuck in your knees, and cover your head. Each adjustment reduced the body's heat loss, though to a small extent, the effect was remarkable. They also adapted to their own metabolism. People living in cold climates will undergo physiological changes over time, with better blood circulation in their limbs, a higher metabolic rate at basal, and higher fat storage efficiency. These adaptations can occur either through natural selection over several generations or throughout an individual's life as the body adapts to the environment. For instance, the Inuit have a higher metabolic rate than people in temperate regions, and they burn more calories at rest to maintain their body temperature. The diet of people in the plains in winter is rich in fat, which can both provide calories and keep warm. Pemmican is a winter staple made from a blend of dried meat, fat and berries. It is dense and rich in calories, providing fuel for the stove in the body and keeping it warm. 1 pound of chicken skin pancake contains approximately 3,000 calories, almost all of which come from fat and protein. It won't freeze solid and can be eaten without preparation. Moreover, during a winter trip when there is no other food, it can support a person through a day. But there are other more subtle and difficult minus-to-minus-track technologies. Snow is used as an insulating material. The Inuit have long known that making proper use of snow is not an enemy but an ally. Its crystal structure captures air in a way that no other material can match, creating an insulating barrier that can transform a howling wasteland into a place almost habitable. The snow piled up at the bottom of the conical tent formed a barrier against the wind and air, just like the snow that isolates the dome ice house. Some reports describe winter camps where campers are partially dug underground and use the thermal mass of the ground to create pit houses. These semi-minus fine structures discovered at the archaeological sites in the Northern Plains show evidence of meticulous design. The floor will be excavated to a depth of 2 or 3 feet and erected on this depression, with its lower edge fixed to the original ground. Even if ice forms on the surface, some heat will still be retained underground. By lowering the floor of the residence, people can obtain waste heat. We found evidence of this in archaeological sites, circular depressions, pillar holes and rocks cracked by fire. But we are unable to reproduce the exact technology used at that time. Building such a shelter requires a great deal of work. It must be dug up before the ground freezes. If this is impossible, a fire must be made to thaw the soil. Then the soil should be removed and the process repeated. And the aforementioned saunas, they are particularly mysterious. The sweating room is a small domed structure, usually built with curved willow branches and covered with leather. Willow frames are usually 6 to 8 feet in diameter and low to the ground, designed to retain heat and steam at maximum efficiency. The entrance faces east, towards the rising sun, although the reason for this direction is both spiritual and practical. The stones were heated in the fire until they glowed, and then brought into the hut and placed in a central pit. Water was poured onto the stones, generating steam, and the temperature inside the hut rose sharply. In some traditions, the stone known as grandfather stone must be carefully selected. River stones that do not explode when heated have a density sufficient to retain heat for a long time. They will be heated in the sacred flame for several hours until they emit an orange-red glow in the darkness. The sweat room is used for purification, therapy and rituals, but in winter it is also a way to experience the intense heat and remind the body of the feeling of warmth. After sweating, people will enter a cold environment. Although this may seem counterintuitive, this contrast is invigorating, and the core body temperature remains high for the following several hours. This alternation between extreme cold has a profound impact on the circulatory system, causing blood vessels to dilate and then constrict, improving overall circulation and potentially triggering the release of endorphins. The impact of cold air on overheated skin is intense and almost painful, but it leaves a vibrant feeling. This approach indicates that people have a complex understanding of how the body regulates its temperature in response to extreme high and low temperatures. But we don't know that all the rituals, all the songs, and all the prayers are accompanied by these practices. The sauna was instilled is a sacred space. Many things that happen inside are private, without records and not shared with outsiders. We have descriptions from anthropologists, travelers and missionaries, but these are all outsider perspectives and are incomplete in definition. We know of their existence because they are mentioned in oral history, but their specific forms have been lost. Is there any song that can calm people down and make the cold more bearable by changing their perception? The relationship between mental state and physical sensation is well documented. Pain can be alleviated through meditation, by concentrating breathing, and by altering the way the nervous system processes signals by changing the state of consciousness. We know that meditation and mental concentration can change the body's perception of temperature. Monks and practice stupas, a form of meditation that enables them to generate body temperature in the snow without freezing. Similar practices also exist among unrecorded indigenous peoples because they are sacred, private and not suitable for outsiders to use. Tama practitioners is can increase their core body temperature through visualization and breathing techniques, imagining the inner flame somehow being transformed into actual metabolic heat production. If these technologies existed among the plains ethnic groups, they would be strictly protected, taught only to beginners, and might be lost when the population was greatly reduced due to disease and war. There is also the problem with the fire itself. Fire is not merely a heat source. It is a living entity, a spirit that requires care and respect. In many indigenous traditions, fire is one of the oldest deities, the first gift and what distinguishes humans from animals. In some traditions it is female, in others male, but always has will and personality. Thanked it and fed it with offerings. Is this merely symbolic? Is there still a deeper purpose? A way to stay focused? To ensure that someone is always paying attention to the fire, always watching? The actual effect of regarding fire as sacred is that it has received continuous attention. In a world where putting out a fire might mean death, religious beliefs and the need for survival are perfectly combined. We discovered a fire pit at the archaeological site, surrounded by stones filled with charcoal and ashes. We found the tools for making a fire, flint, pyrite and a fire drill. We know that when people move house, they carry fire with them and store it in smoldering punk wood or slow-burning fungi. Fire drills require skills and patience. The correct combination of wood types, when a hard spindle rotates rapidly on a softer board, the finders produced by friction will eventually smolder and ignite. In damp or cold conditions, making a fire in this way may take half an hour or even longer. Fire is precious. Letting it go out is a failure and a danger. There are still some things that we cannot measure. The psychological comfort brought by fire creates a center, a focus and a sense of security in the darkness. Human beings are fragile creatures and cannot adapt to the darkness. Fire prolonged the daytime, creating a space that kept darkness at bay. The circle of firelight becomes the boundary of the known world, and beyond it lies everything else. The firelight flickered, and in its flickering, darkness was blocked in the bay. This cannot be quantified, but it truly exists. The shadows of dance, the dame of light on familiar faces. The way flames transform a hidden wall into a moving canvas of amber and gold. These things are very important. They create conditions for storytelling, interpersonal relationships, and the dissemination of knowledge and culture. There are still some mysteries that we can never solve. We know that some winter camps are located in specific places, such as river valleys, sheltered coulees, and areas with natural windbreaks. Year after year, generation after generation, these places have returned here. In the archaeological records we have discovered evidence of different levels of occupations that have been repeatedly used over the centuries, indicating that some places are more suitable for winter survival. But how do people choose these places? Is it the accumulation of trials and errors over several generations? Is there still knowledge about microclimate, about the subtle differences in temperature and wind patterns? The difference between a good winter camp and a deadly one might just be a few degrees of temperature, a slight drop in wind speed, and better access to unfrozen water. Knowledge about the existence of these places is of vital importance and should be passed down with great care, just like other survival skills. We know that people closely observe the places where animals rest on the slopes they like. Bison dig grass in the snow in winter. They choose places with shallower snow that has been blown away by the wind. On the wind-swept ridge, bison are running in the light snow, looking for hay. This is also a place where camps can be set up because there is less snow to deal with here and the possibility of being buried by snow is smaller. And observing them as a form of education. Have people learned lessons from this? Following the bison is not only for obtaining meat, but also for getting to know the local scenery. We discovered rock paintings and hieroglyphics in caves and rock bunkers. Some of these sites show evidence of winter occupation. The emergence of rock art in areas clearly inhabited during cold seasons has raised questions about priorities and motives. Why spend time and energy creating images when survival is at stake? The images of animals, dolls and abstract patterns are all created by people sitting in cold weather, chiseling through stones and painting with mineral pigments. Why? The pigments themselves, such as ochre, charcoal, and white clay, must be collected, prepared, and sometimes mixed with fats or plant extract to create the appropriate consistency. This work was painstakingly accomplished with cold fingers on the rough stone surface in dim light. Is it a ceremony, storytelling, record-keeping, or something else? The images still exist, but their meanings are being blurred by time. Some images seem to depict hunting, while others show rituals. There are also some geometric patterns that may represent tribal symbols, star maps, territorial marks, or purely aesthetic expressions. We project our understanding onto them, but we cannot know exactly the intentions of the producers. We can speculate and explain, but we cannot be sure. Clothing is also a mystery. The clothing worn by the people of the plain is a masterpiece of superb craftsmanship, each piece representing hundreds of hours of skilled labor. From the initial hunting to the final decoration, it may take several weeks to prepare a winter coat. We found fragments of leather coats in dry caves of frozen ground. We can see the stitching, cutting and layering, but we have no idea what it feels like to wear these clothes day after day. How they move with the body, how they become hard in the cold and soft near the fire. Leather becomes hard after freezing, almost like armor, and must be carefully heated and processed to be bent. But near the fire, the same material becomes soft, almost liquid, and conforms to the shape of the body. We know that animal skins are eaten by the brain, a process that makes them soft and supple. But we don't know all the steps, all the techniques that have been lost. We know that silk thread is made of tendons, and bone needles and all kinds of bone needles are used for sewing. Clothes are decorated with quills and beads, but we don't know how long it takes to make a piece of clothing. How long does it take to prepare a winter coat? The tanning process of the brain is both laborious and time-consuming. The cowhide must be thoroughly cleaned, with the meat and fat scraped off, and then treated with a paste made from animal brains. This paste contains natural oils and enzymes that can break down the proteins in the cowhide. We found tools on the ground, such as scrapers, knives, etc. We could guess their uses, but the hands that used them and the knowledge that guided them had vanished. Among them there is a kind of loneliness, a feeling within reach. The gap between mastering the tool and fully understanding its uses is huge. We can replicate actions, but we cannot replicate the accumulated instincts or the thousands of small adjustments that come from a lifetime of practice. Standing in the present and looking back on the past, we see shadows, echoes, and clues to a lifestyle that we could hardly have imagined. However, among these hints there is something profound. Archaeological records provide us with physical objects, but not experience. But not always. What does it mean? What does it feel like? And how does it shape those who have experienced it? Those who endured those winters are not much different from us. They loved. They were afraid. They hoped. They were sad. They tell jokes, fall in love, quarrel with their families, worry about their children, and dream of better times. The cold did not make them lose their humanity. If there is any difference, it is that it may have enhanced their humanity, making every warm and connected moment more precious. They felt the cold, fought against it, and found a way to survive. It is not guaranteed. Many people fail to survive the winter, but generation after generation of people have carried forward the knowledge. In winter camps in the Northern Plains, during particularly harsh seasons, the mortality rate can sometimes be as high as 10% to 15%. Children and the elderly are the most vulnerable, but even healthy adults may give in to accidents, sudden cold waves, and the accumulated small stress will eventually overwhelm the body's defense. Some of this knowledge is not preserved in books or museums, but in the memories of future generations, in the stories still being told, and in the practices still ongoing. This mystery has not been completely solved yet. There are still people who know how to set up a conical tent correctly. They remember certain songs from ceremonies, and they would use their brains to dry the skin or make pancakes according to traditional methods. This kind of knowledge exists in an unstable state, neither completely preserved nor completely lost. It is incomplete and fragmented, but it is there waiting to be pieced together, waiting for us to listen, to imagine, and to respect the wisdom and tenacity of our predecessors. The act of memory itself becomes a form of survival, a way to ensure that the knowledge and experience of past generations continue to inform the present. When we ask people how to stay warm on the coldest nights, we are actually asking some bigger questions. How do they maintain their humanity in an environment that we can hardly imagine? Although the answer is incomplete, it lies in the details we can reconstruct, in the gap between imagination and respect that must be filled. We know about the tent engineering, the layered bedding, and the meticulous management of fires. However, we must imagine a child waking up at night, frightened by the wind but comforted by the warmth and gentle comfort of his parents. We can imagine the skills needed to keep a family alive for months in the dark and cold. Always stay vigilant. The wisdom accumulated determines life and death. This is not a passive existence, not simply lasting until spring, but an active contact with the environment and a continuous application of knowledge and technology. Winter can showcase the most essential intelligence and wisdom of human beings. Every aspect of life must be considered, planned and executed precisely, because mistakes are often fatal. Almost everything has an agreement. Set up tents, organize the interior of the tents, manage food supply, and treat frostbite and hypothermia. These agreements have been taught since childhood and passed down through demonstration and practice, becoming instincts. We can study material culture, analyze tools and structures, but we cannot fully master the spiritual landscape and worldview to make these technologies not only possible but also elegant. It is known that the growth pattern of a thick winter coat of water buffaloes is dripping water and snow, and this pattern should be taken into account when making the robe. The smoke produced by some plants when burning helps preserve meat and repel insects. Realizing that although the angle of the sun is weak in winter, it can still be utilized. The type facing south is warmer than the type facing north. None of these are written in the manual or textbooks. They are rooted in practice, in the way things are done, in the correction of young people's mistakes by elders, and in the observations accumulated by generations who have closely lived with the environment. The relationship between people and landscapes is not one of domination, but rather a negotiation and a continuous learning process. Land is a teacher, a provider, and sometimes an enemy, but it always exists and always shapes the conditions for survival. In this kind of relationship, warmth is not merely a physical state, but also a spiritual one. The warmth of the stove fire is also the warmth of the family sitting around it. The warmth of the stories told repeatedly, the warmth of the songs sung, and the warmth of the sense of belonging that this community will take care of you when you can't take good care of yourself. Those elderly people who could no longer hunt or gather were still valued, still received food, and still placed near the stove, because they carried knowledge, memories, and stories that connected the present and the past. This kind of social warmth, this network of care and obligation, is as crucial to survival as any physical technology. We found evidence of this care in the archaeological records. These burials indicate that people with severe disabilities have survived to adulthood, and they must have received support from the community for many years. The survival of disadvantaged groups might be the clearest indicator to measure the maturity and moral development of a society. The issue of how people keep warm has transcended the mere physical problem and expanded into the cultural domain, the social organization domain, and the value domain that determines who lives and who dies. Warmth is related to heat, yes, but it is also related to tolerance, to the decision to share resources, even if these resources are scarce. On the coldest nights, when the fire in the stove burns low, the wind howls and it's pitch-minus dark, what keeps people alive is not just the animal skin walls and fur robes, but the conviction that they are not alone and that others are enduring the same situation. The leaving that morning will come and that spring will return. This psychological resilience, this ability to endure hardship without losing hope, is as outstanding as any material technology. Yes, this requires a certain kind of mental tenacity, but it also demands a profound trust in the natural rhythm. This confidence stems from experience. No matter how terrifying the winter is, it is only temporary. Stories centered around winter fires often emphasize endurance, patience, and the ultimate victory of perseverance and overcoming adversity. These are not merely entertainment, but also education, preparation, and a way to train the mind, and aiding people to view difficulties as natural and viable. Of course, there are also some moments that are transcendent and beautiful. The way the sun hangs low over the winter horizon illuminates the ice crystals in the air, generating halos, sound waves and beams of light. On a cold and silent night, even the sounds seem to freeze. The northern lights, with green and red curtains flickering in the darkness, are mysterious and sacred. They are interpreted as the dance of the soul, as a message from ancestors, and as a sign of what is to come. These beautiful moments witnessed in the midst of hardship must be very important and will surely make you feel that the struggle is worthwhile. The ability of human beings to find meaning and beauty, even in difficult circumstances, might be our greatest survival feature. It makes us endure and persist and enables us to find reasons to keep going when purely rational calculations might make us yield. The people in the winter camp are aware of this, whether intentionally or not. They create beauty in clothing, tools, and rituals. Beauty is not a luxury but a necessity, a way to affirm that life is worth living, proving that existence is more important than survival. Decorative conical tent cushions, intricate coils on a pair of deer leather shoes, and carved patterns on fired rills. The time and energy consumed by these matters could have been spent on more practical tasks. But they are not frivolous. They are crucial for maintaining morale, a sense of identity and self-worth. Perhaps this is the deepest mystery among all the enigmas. It is not about how people survive, but how they maintain their humanity, their culture, their sense of mission and meaning in an environment that tests all limits. The answer partly lies in the technologies we can rebuild, such as tents, clothing, and fire management. But more fundamentally, it is the intangible qualities expressed by these technologies. Carefully prepare a buffalo robe, making it oft warm and beautiful, which illustrates the relationship with the animal, the gratitude for its sacrifice, and the recognition that the robe is not only insulating but also a gift. People's concern for fire, regarding it as a sacred thing, ensures that it receives the care needed to keep burning. The most vulnerable people in the tent sleep in the warmest place, which reflect a social ethics that holds that the collective is more important than the individual, and the survival is a public undertaking. These attitudes, these ways of existence in this world cannot be dug out from underground, but they are as real and as important as any artifacts. We now live in a world where warmth can be achieved simply by pressing a switch. Here, we are isolated from the outside world, and this way of isolation seems unimaginable to the people in the winter warming camp. Most of us have forgotten what true coldness means and that our survival depends on our own knowledge and skills as well as the cooperation of those around us. But while forgetting, we also lose something. We have lost our familiarity with fire, our understanding of wind and weather, and the sense of blending into the landscape, rather than being separated from it. We may have lost a certain degree of resilience and confidence, which comes from knowing that we can endure difficulties because our ancestors did. The mystery of how people stay warm on the coldest nights is ultimately the mystery of human ability, adaptability, creativity, and social unity. It reminds us that our capabilities far exceed what we usually imagine. Human beings, as animals, may seem fragile on the surface, but they are exceptionally strong when needed. The design of the conical tent, the technology of brain tanning, and the knowledge contained in the recipe for pancakes represent the wisdom accumulated over thousands of years, attempts and refined experiments. Successful strategies have been passed down, while unsuccessful ones have been forgotten. This kind of knowledge is not static but constantly evolving, adapting to new environments and absorbing new insights. And it hasn't completely disappeared. There are still people passing on this knowledge, practicing these techniques and maintaining the connection with the lifestyle of their ancestors. They are fewer than before and their knowledge is more fragmented, but it still exists. In this persistence there is hope. This means that we haven't completely cut off our connection with the past. The wisdom of those who survived the coldest nights can still teach us something. We may never know exactly what it feels like to sleep in a winter tent, wake up with frost on your face, and take care of a bonfire on a night below zero. But we can pay tribute to those who have done these things. They survived in seemingly impossible circumstances and maintained their culture and humanity in situations that we could hardly imagine. We can study what remains, listen to what is still being said, and imagine what remains with humility and respect. The warmth that sustains them is physical, yes, but it is also social, spiritual, and cultural. It is the warmth between people, the sharing of knowledge, and the beauty created in the face of difficulties. That is the tenacious warmth, the warmth that refuses to yield to the cold, and the determination to welcome another spring. Finally, what we must remember is that the people at the winter camp did indeed see another spring. Year after year, generation after generation, they have survived. By surviving, they ensure our existence, and we will inherit their world and their wisdom, though incomplete. This mystery remains incomplete. But it is right there, waiting for us to piece together, waiting for us to listen, to imagine, and to respect the wisdom and tenacity of our predecessors. In the process of paying tribute to them, we connect ourselves to the long chain of human endurance, to the long chain of accumulated and shared knowledge, and to the long chain of the tenacious determination to survive and thrive, even in the seemingly absent cold. This connection that transcends time, this recognition of sharing humanity with people whose lives are completely different from ours, is in itself a kind of warmth. It reminds us that we are not alone, we are part of a story much larger than ourselves, and the struggles and victories of the past echo in the present. The fire that burned in the center of the winter, 10 to 200 years ago, has disappeared. Its heat dissipated into the cold air. But the knowledge of how to make a fire and to take care of it was preserved and encoded in artifacts, memories, and the practices of later generations. This kind of knowledge is a warmth that transcends time, a gift from predecessors to successors. So we stand to the present, looking back at those winter camps and the people gathered around the fire. We ask ourselves the question, how do they keep warm? The answer, though incomplete and fragmented, is maintained through knowledge, through the community, through the determination to persist, and through understanding that warmth is not merely physical but deep within the human heart. A quality of connection, a quality of care, a quality that does not let the cold extinguish the light. Winter reveals the truth that other seasons have concealed, one of which is that not everyone can face the cold equally. Snow fell on everyone. The wind blew through every camp. But the experience of enduring these forces was not consistent. Never, and perhaps never will. In those societies that take pride in generosity and public sharing, differences still exist, subtle and often self-evident. Yet they are real. These differences determine who can sleep soundly, who can ramble all night, who can eat well, who can go hungry, who can live with dignity, and who can barely survive. When others survived, one chief was not frozen to death. One of the medical professionals didn't leave the rest of the band worse struggling. However, there are differences in degree and access, and in the small comforts that make survival more bearable. Extra buffalo robes, a covered sleeping area, and a guarantee that tomorrow's meal will definitely come. Like many plain peoples, the Lakota people have a relatively equal social structure, in contrast to the strict hierarchical system of European society. There is no king wearing her long robe and jewels, no landlord nobles collecting tributary from farmers, and no hereditary wealth system passed down from generation to generation. Leadership is gained through skills, courage, wisdom, and generosity. If a leader does not serve the people, he or she may lose leadership. A person who bravely leads in summer will find himself without followers in winter if his judgment deteriorates or his heart becomes selfish. But this does not mean that everyone is equal, especially in winter. This season has a way of magnifying various social differences, making the things softened or concealed by the abundance of summer clearly visible. A leader, a person chosen to lead a tribe, has the responsibility to make him stand out. People expected him to enable his people to decide when to move the camp, where to hunt, and how to allocate resources when the game was scarce and their stomachs were empty. Because of these responsibilities, he is often ungranted certain privileges. His tent might be larger, with its water buffalo leather walls providing double insulation. It is located in a more sheltered spot, perhaps in a cotton poplar for a store against a protective cliff. He might get the best pieces of meat after hunting, or the thickest buffalo robe with dense fur, frost on the surface but warmth inside. The women in his family might have more fabric for sewing, more porcupine feathers for decoration, and more tools to make the job of survival less tiring. This is not greed. This is pragmatic. Leaders must be strong. I'm sketching incapable of making clear decisions in times of crisis. This requires eating well, getting enough rest, and better resisting the cold, because cold can make people's minds dull and their bodies weak. But such privileges are conditional, obtained through services, and accompanied by absolute and unforgivable expectations. A chief who hoards resources, keeps his people warm when they are cold and feeds their children well, when they are hungry will not last long. Generosity is the currency of leadership. A chief should give more than he has to ensure that widows and orphans are cared for, the elderly have enough food, and hunters have the tools they need. His tent might be the largest in the camp, but it is also a place where strangers seek help. Here, meetings last until late at night, and here, the burden of the entire community has to be borne by one person. So his privilege is real, but it is also a burden. The weight of responsibility can be seen from the faces of those who rely on him. His warm tent and better rope. None of these are luxuries, rather, they are tools that enable him to serve and maintain strong enough leadership when it is most needed. On winter nights when the temperature drops sharply and the wind roars like a lidding, angry thing, the chief will stay awake, watch over his fire and prepare for any crisis in the camp. He was expected to be the first to volunteer for the perilous winter hunt, risking his life to track bison in the blizzard, to demonstrate the courage he demanded others to show. The different kind of privileged space. They are the guardians of sacred knowledge. They communicate with souls. They understand the intangible forces that shape the world, and they mediate between the visible and the invisible. In winter, when diseases spread in enclosed tents and people become weak due to insufficient food and the merciless cold, the role of pharmacist becomes crucial. They held a healing ceremony that lasted all night, singing songs that summoned spiritual power to drive away diseases, and concocting medicine with tree roots and herbs, carefully collected and dried in the warm months. Because their work is sacred, they are often unprotected from the most severe sufferings. Doctors may receive special furs. The white buffalo robes are particularly precious, not because of vanity, but because these items have spiritual significance and are believed to enhance the power of the pharmacist and be associated with the sacred. Their conical tents might contain carefully wrapped cold-proof items, bundles of sacred objects, herbs that need to be preserved at specific temperatures, and items used in ceremonies that cannot be frozen or damaged. On the pillars of the thatched cottage hung braided fragrant grass. In the wooden barrel were bundles of sage, and in the place of glory were painted shields, wrapped in soft leather. The warmth of a pharmacist is not only personal comfort but also a kind of spiritual protection. If the sacred objects freeze, if the witch doctor falls ill and is unable to perform the rituals that connect people to the spiritual world, the entire community will suffer, as the connection with a force stronger than itself is weakened or cut off. Therefore, the community ensures the survival of medical staff and provides them with what they need, not out of fear, but out of a profound understanding that some roles are too important to take risks. When a successful hunt brought meat to the camp, some of it was sent to the alchemist's residence, and then it began to be distributed widely. When women are tanning, the softest and most delicate leather is usually provided to pharmacists, as their work requires them to sit for long periods during ceremonies, and comfort can help them focus more on their spirit. When people collect firewood, the extra firewood is piled up near the medicine bucket, as these sacred firewood need continuous warmth and the ritual usually burns throughout the night. Skilled hunters also hold a privileged position, although their privileges may be the most publicly obtained and least controversial. A hunter who can defeat water buffaloes in the depth of winter, a hunter who can track elk in neem on a steep snow, and a hunter who can return with meat time and again when others return empty minus-handed. The value of that hunter is incalculable, so the hunter has received priority in some aspects. After a successful hunt, they received fresh animal skins, which were still warm and steaming in the frozen air. These animal skins can be made into clothes, robes and deer leather shoes to keep feet dry in the snow. The warmth brought by fresh killings direct and precious. The hunters who provided these foods not only won gratitude but also reaped actual benefits. He may obtain the liver, tongue, the most abundant organ flesh, providing rapid energy and intensive nutrition. This kind of food provides strength and endurance for the next hunt. His family ate better and dressed warmer, which in turn enabled him to hunt more effectively, creating a successful cycle. His children wear leather shoes that don't leak water. His wife has enough ends to mend the tears in their room. His elderly parents got some fresh meat to keep them strong during the coldest months. But this privilege is also accompanied by expectations. A great hunter is expected to share his prey and support those who cannot hunt, those widows whose husbands have passed away, those old men whose hands are too shaky to draw the bow, and those who have been injured in accidents or wars. Hoarding meat is unimaginable and violates the fundamental social contract that sustains society. A hunter may keep enough food to meet the needs of his immediate family members, but the rest is distributed according to custom to elders, leaders, families in need, and anyone in need, all of whom are seen as truly hungry. Therefore, even the privileges of hunters are publicanly integrated into the welfare of the group. His skills enhanced him, but they also made him take on some responsibilities. Sometimes these responsibilities were heavier than the races he carried on his shoulders. Miles of thick snow. There are also people who hold sacred objects, guardians of tubes and bundles, whose role is to maintain the spiritual center of the community. In winter, these individuals usually receive special care because their packages require extraordinary attention. The sacred pipeline cannot be frozen. Some herbs and items require specific temperatures and conditions. A guardian of a sacred package may have a slightly warmer space in the tent, may receive extra firewood to ensure the package is protected, and may be exempted from certain public labor so that they can fully devote themselves to their spiritual responsibilities. This is not a personal consolation. This is the preservation of something larger than an individual. These packages contain the spiritual power accumulated over several generations, items blessed by visions, and also those carrying the prayers of our ancestors who entered the spiritual world long ago. However, despite these differences, winter still has ways to flatten everything. Cold does not care about status, does not recognize privilege, does not stop at the chief's door, nor does it show pity to the old hand of the pharmacist. If the fire goes out, the chief will freeze as easily as the common people. If a hunt fails and the stored food dries up, the practitioners may starve to death. A great hunter might die from the scorching sun if he encounters a sudden storm. His skills are of no use to the wind. The wind will steal his breath and coldness, and it will paralyze his fingers until he can no longer hold the weapon. Winter respects only itself, its own strength, its own timeline, and its own cold cruelty. This kind of knowledge shapes behavior and fosters a sense of humility. The chief might have had a warm tent, but he still stayed up all night, worrying about his people. Calculating how many days the stored food could last, I wanted to know if the bison would return before hunger came. Pharmacists may be dressed in sacred robes, but when they go outside to gather snow and fetch water, they still feel the bone-chilling wind. When their treatment proved ineffective, they still knew the painful anxiety. A child still died. The hunter might have eaten better, but every time he went into the snow he had to risk his life. He still knew that the slightest mistake might mean that he would never return to the warm little house again. There are also some customs and rituals that strengthen the connection of the community in winter and remind everyone to be interdependent. During the long winter nights, the cold makes outdoor activities impossible, and darkness seems to stretch on forever. People often look back and discuss the count of winter, a scroll history preserved by many plain tribes. The elders would point to the symbols drawn on the buffalo hide and explain what each symbol represented. It was a big hunt, with a large number of bison, turning the plain pitch black. A battle in which both sides were weakened. One hungry winter, people ate their horses and then their fur coats. It was a prosperous year. Every child was chubby and smiling. These recitation classes are not just history classes. They remind people that this community once existed. This difficulty is temporary. Spring will come again as usual. Telling these stories is a shared warmth and a way to strengthen connections when physical survival is unstable. Young people listen and understand their place. This is a continuity that transcends memory. They realize that they are part of something greater than personal suffering. There is also a gift-giving ceremony where those who have more give to those who have less. A successful hunter might give away a whole buffalo robe, or several pairs of deer leather shoes studded with rabbit fur, or a portion of dried meat representing several weeks of his labor. These gifts are not what Europeans understand as charity. They are investments in the social structure, acknowledging that today's givers may be tomorrow's recipients. Winter makes this reciprocity obvious, indispensable, and cannot be ignored or denied. You give because you know that one day you might need to get something. The survival of a community depends on the continuous circulation of such resources. If a person generously donates when he successfully hunts in winter, he can obtain some form of social insurance. He knew that if his fate changed, if he got injured, or if his skills failed, others would remember him and in turn offer him help. Women also played specific roles, shaping their experiences of winter. The work of preparing animal skins, sewing clothes, maintaining tents, cooking and taking care of children. All of these are women's jobs that are crucial for survival. But sometimes they are overlooked because they are monotonous and lack charm. Seamstress women who are skilled in tanning, adept at making deer skins that won't leak or wear out even after walking in the snow for several days, and skilled at sewing clothes that fit well, keep warm and do not restrict movement. Such women increase the chances of their families surviving. In some cases, particularly skilled women gain status, and their abilities are recognized and valued. They are sought after by others who want to learn from them or exchange jobs. However, in some respects, women's work has also been overlooked and taken for granted because it is continuous, necessary, and unremarkable. A man can gain status through a successful hunt, return to the camp with meat, and be immediately recognized, rewarded, and promoted in the eyes of the community. A woman can achieve status through years of continuous skilled labor. To maintain the life and comfort of her family, her ability has accumulated countless small acts, and her recognition has been slow, quiet, without ceremony or public admission. However, her contribution is equally crucial for survival. In winter, when labor intensifies, when leather needs frequent repair, as the cold can make it brittle, when children need frequent care, as diseases spread rapidly at close range, and when fire needs constant feeding, as putting it out means death, women bear a special burden. Their hands are always busy, always at work, always engaged in endless tasks that make life possible. Some women can handle this burden better than others. They have more help and more resources, which creates a subtle hierarchy, even in the field of women's work. An older woman with an adult daughter can help her and take on some endless tasks, which is an advantage that a young mother with a child cannot compare with. A woman who married a successful hunter. Her skills are in high demand and she can exchange her work for additional resources. Her parents are still alive and can help take care of their grandchildren. These women have advantages, but they also have obligations because skills and status mean that you're expected to teach, help young women or those who are less fortunate to share your knowledge. Children occupy a unique position in winter. They are the future and the continuation of the people. Therefore, they are protected and given priority when food is in short supply, close to fire, even if it means that adults sleep in colder places. But they are also very vulnerable and more susceptible to cold and disease. And their survival has never been guaranteed. Parents are doing difficult calculations in winter. How much food should be given to each child? When there is not enough food for everyone, how to distribute warmth? Which child is strong enough to endure more difficulties so that a weaker sibling can survive? None of these are choices that everyone wants to make, but winter forces them to do so, and every household has to bear the consequences. The mother might give the warmest place to the sickly child to sleep in, while the strong child would sleep near the edge of the conical tent, and the cold would quietly run. There are always some people on the fringes. They have no families, no clear roles, and they rely on the generosity of the community. A widow whose husband died in hunting or war, orphans whose parents died of illness or accident, disabled people who cannot work in the traditional way, and elderly people who live longer than their children find themselves living alone in a world that requires families to survive. These people are especially vulnerable in winter. In good years when resources are abundant, The number of bison is sufficient, and the stored food seems to be sufficient. They will be taken care of, brought into the circle, and given what they need. Someone will bring them meat. Someone will repair their conical tent. Someone will check their fire to make sure they won't freeze to death. But in a bad year before the water buffaloes arrived, everyone was struggling, the stored food was running out, and every family was calculating how long they could live. In those years, marginalized people suffered the most. The social contract still exists, but it has been tested, stretched, and bent under the weight of collective despair. Sometimes when it bends to a certain extent, a difficult choice has to be made. Choose who received help and who didn't. These choices were not made easily. They left scars, psychological, social and spiritual traumas that persisted long after the physical danger had passed. There is a story passed down orally, which tells of a cold winter when a band had to leave behind an old woman who could no longer walk. Her leg was already lame and her body was so weak that it couldn't recover. Carrying her meant that the entire band was moving too slowly and couldn't reach a safe place before the food ran out. They left her in a sheltered place where there was a small fire that could burn for several hours. They could only save some food from their meager rations. And then they kept walking forward, because staying meant that everyone would die. This woman died. Everyone knew she would die, and she herself knew she would die too. But this story remembered her, praised her sacrifice and mourned the necessity that made her make it. This is the dark side of winter privileges and survival. Not everyone can be saved. Sometimes love means letting go. But the story also emphasizes that this decision was made in sadness, not in coldness. This woman's memory was preserved in the form of an oral tradition, which was a form of respect and a way to show that her life was important, even if circumstances forced her to end it. Winter reveals the power and limitations of social bonds. It shows who has resources and who doesn't, but it also reveals that these resources are fragile, privileges are relative, and that everyone is ultimately at the mercy of a force stronger than themselves, that weather, the movement of hunting animals, and the unpredictable spirit that controls the natural world. If the bison doesn't come, the chief and his warm tent may still lose everything. If the disease strikes and there is no effective treatment, the pharmacist in the sacred robe will still die. If the deities revoke their protection for reasons beyond human comprehension, even a great hunter would freeze if caught by a storm. If the wind attraction suddenly changed and the snow fell so thickly that he couldn't even see his own hand. Before he found his way back to the camp, the cold pierced through his clothes, causing his heart to stop beating. Therefore, the privilege of winter is always harmonized by humility, for people know that survival is never personal but always collective. Survival is never guaranteed but always unstable. Elites like them understand that their status depends on their services, and they can only be as powerful as the communities they serve. The chief without followers was just sitting alone in the tent. If no one acknowledges it, his position will be meaningless. And the community itself is also aware that some roles need to be protected. Investing in leaders, therapists and skilled individuals is an investment in collective survival. Maintaining the health of the CIO means that when consensus fails, someone can make difficult decisions. Ensuring the safety of pharmacists means maintaining a spiritual connection, which endows life with meaning beyond material existence. Keeping the hunter strong means that when everything else fails, there is someone to offer help. The balance between individual privileges and public needs, between hierarchy and equality, and between services and rights is delicate and requires constant negotiation. And winter is the season when this balance is most tested. The long nights and scarce resources have created such a situation. Every decision has consequences. And every choice regarding food, warmth or accommodation allocation must be weighed against competing demands and limited supplies. When spring finally comes, when the snow melts, the world becomes gentle, and the green grass sprouts from the dead soil. These tense relationships often ease. Abundance has returned, or at least the promise of abundance. The calculation of winter has become less urgent, less painful, and less full of life minus death's significance. But they haven't vanished, for the memory of winter still lingers. People remember who shared, who hoarded, who served, who failed, who survived, who didn't, and how each person performed during the toughest times. These memories shaped the social order for the rest of the year, influencing who was elected as a leader, who was trusted, and who was valued. A generous person in winter won respect and got through the hard times. A woman who helped others when she was struggling herself gained an irreplaceable position. In this sense, winter is not merely a season but a melting pot of society. In this era, the essence of interpersonal relationships has been revealed and elevated. It strips away the superficial, performative and merely polite things, revealing people's true selves when life and death are at hand and comfort is a distant memory. And what runs through all of this is flame. In each tent, whether it belonged to a chieftain or a commoner, a doctor or a hunter, a skilled woman or a struggling widow, there was a pile of fire burning in the center of each tent. Smoke rose from the opening at the top, and warmth radiated outward, pushing away the cold that was pressing on the water cowhide wolves. That fire was taken care of, fed and guarded by someone, enduring the long and cold night. Fire doesn't care who you are, what status you hold, what privileges you enjoy, or what achievements you have made in the warm season. It just burns or it doesn't burn at all. Whether you sleep warm or cold does not depend on your posture, but on whether someone keeps the fire burning, whether someone stays awake while others are sleeping, whether someone adds firewood at the right time, and whether someone understands that fire itself is life and cannot be let go out. In this sense, winter is the ultimate democracy. During this season, all human distinctions are temporary, all hierarchies are temporary, and all lives equally depend on the same fundamental elements: fire, shelter, food, and the willingness to endure. The fire of the chief and the fire of the widow require the same attention. If no one takes care of the flames, the farmer's tent will turn cold as quickly as a hunter's. In the darkest hours of winter, when the cold is so intense, breathing freezes in the air, exposed skin burns hot by the wind, and when the sun just rises above the horizon, darkness takes over 20 hours of each day. In that era, everyone understood that survival was both a collective effort and an individual responsibility. Your life depends on others, and others' lives also depend on you. This interdependence is not a weakness but the foundation of existence. The privileges that some people enjoy, the small comforts and advantages that make survival more bearable, exist within this framework of interdependence. They are not a separation from the community, but an expression of the community's needs. The need for leadership, the need for spiritual guidance, the need for skilled labor, and the need for successful hunting. Because these privileges serve all, as long as their exercise is responsible and generous, they will be tolerated and even celebrated. However, when privilege turns into exploitation and when those with advantages ignore their obligations to society, only for personal gain, the system will collapse and everyone will suffer. Winter will not tolerate such a breakdown for too long. The demands of this season are too harsh, too ruthless, and too absolute, not allowing selfishness or the abandonment of public bonds. Thus, generations of people have learned how to balance personal achievements and collective welfare, how to recognize and reward skills, while ensuring that no one is isolated. They learned these lessons in winter because the consequences of failure were direct and fatal. For the rest of the year, they have been working hard. The stories told by the bonfire in winter, the decisions made at the cold committee meetings, and the generosity and sacrifices made during the toughest months, minus all of these, have become part of cultural memory. A shared understanding of how to be a person in a world where beauty and horror alternate. When the next winter comes, as always, people remember, prepare and endure, knowing that spring will follow, knowing that they will survive together among it all, knowing that in the space between the cold outside and the flame within, their humanity is both tested and affirmed. So we reach the end of this quiet journey, drifting and exploring in the frozen night of another era. In our imagination, we have walked through the daily struggles of ordinary people, the endless gathering of firewood, the negotiation between smoke and cold, and the tossing and turning sleep on the hard ground. We followed the black elk through his childhood winters, watching him grow from a trembling boy into a man affected by cold and vision, a person who understands that survival requires both physical endurance and mental strength. We have touched upon the remaining mysteries, the questions about temperature that artifacts cannot fully answer, and the technologies and processes that we can only partially restore their exact properties. We have witnessed that even in relatively equal societies, winter creates differences, how privileges and responsibilities are intertwined, and how survival is both personal and collective. Perhaps the most impressive thing is the simple fact of endurance. Generation after generation, people are facing winter. If we are not well-prepared, winter will kill us within a few hours. Not only did they survive, but they also created a rich culture, a complex spiritual system and advanced technology. They didn't use the tools that we took for granted. There are no synthetic insulating materials, no central heating systems, no weather forecasts, and no grocery stores transported from warm regions. They only have things that can be made, carried, remembered and passed on. This is enough, barely enough, but still enough. There is something both humble and inspiring in it. We live in an era that assumes warmth, where winter is an inconvenience rather than a life-threatening torment. There, we control the environment by moving the dial. But this comfort comes at a price. We have lost the knowledge that has sustained humanity for thousands of years and the skills that once determined life and death. We no longer know how to look approaching storm by interpreting the sky, nor do we know how to dry trees or make fires in the wind. We no longer understand the cold as those people do, regarding it as an eternal existence, a force that requires respect, negotiation and endurance. While losing this knowledge, we also lose something of ourselves, something related to the adaptability and our species. But we can still remember the past and still draw essence from it. We can recognize that the warmth we enjoy is built on the wisdom accumulated by countless generations. Every technological advancement, from simple padding to modern insulation materials, represents people's profound understanding of how to survive. At this very moment, we can feel the warmth and the extraordinary achievement of sleeping fearlessly on a winter night. When we look back at those who warmed themselves around small fires in secluded places, what we feel is not pity but admiration, not a sense of superiority but kinship. They are us, just different in time and environment. They love fear and hope as much as we do. They watched their children sleep and prayed for the arrival of spring just like any parent. They felt cold and fought against it. In this process, they proved that we can adapt to some essential aspects of human nature. We persist. Even if survival seems impossible, we can still find ways to endure it. So, when you lie on a warm bed and fall asleep slowly in a temperature-controlled room, think of those winter nights on the plains, when people wrapped in buffalo robes tended to the fire in the dark. Don't regard them as distant historical figures, but as living people, just as if you were living in your own era. Be grateful for the warmth you have. Yes, but at the same time, one can also feel the connection with that long chain of survival, the unbroken connection with those who had endured one winter after another. So in the end, someone, perhaps you, can sleep warmly and safely. The fire they were taking care of was not completely extinguished. It is still burning in the systems that heat our homes, in the knowledge that insulates our walls, in our memories of resisting the cold, in our memories we have retained some warmth. So take a rest now. Let these stories settle in your mind, just like snowflakes gently falling on the silent plain. Make the image disappear, the smoke rising from the winter camp, a face illuminated by firelight, an endless expanse of white ice and snow. Let yourself drift with the current, just like those people drift with the current and fall asleep. A day's work has left me exhausted. Listening to the crackling sound of the fire in the stove has calmed me down. I believe that the sun will rise again tomorrow, the fire in the stove will be reignited, and life will go on. Have a good sleep in the warmth. While sleeping, we pay tribute to all those who, after the long winter nights, under the unchanging starry sky, and in the unsoftened cold, have separated us across centuries but have not been able to sever the fundamental connection of our common humanity. The past winter nights have come to an end. Your warm night has come. Rest easy.